I met this kind of ordinary-looking fellow, John C. Johnson. That was his name. He called himself a recovering Catholic. He was a wise man. For many years he was my best friend, and I loved him as much as any man can love a man. When I first met John, he was working at the Fremont County Mental Health Clinic as a psychiatric social worker. He traveled once a week to Riverton, where he set up an encounter group. I was searching. So was Anna. Our group consisted of 10 or 12 ordinary men and women with various problems, troubled marriages, emotional pain. We wanted to learn more about who we were, and that was to be accomplished by a simple technique, telling the truth. This new experience of encounter grouping seemed radical, but the idea was simple and right. To become a person, one had to first become acquainted with oneself, and that required one to become aware of one's feelings. And after that, to become a person, one had to develop the elusive skill of sharing one's feelings with others. When the notion of these simple propositions sank through, it struck me like salvation staggers the born-again. Before I had felt, and deeply. Before I had been only too aware of my feelings. But mostly I fought them back. Feelings caused pain. Feelings were dangerous. If one could contain one's feelings, perhaps one could survive in this world. I thought that. But now suddenly feelings were it. In the group I became the protagonist. Often I became too powerful, too unrelenting, too aggressive, too oppressive. To some I became a sort of shaman. To others I was a frightening ogre. Then one day John Johnson took me aside. "The Episcopal clergy and their wives are going to have a couples group," he said. "You and Anna ought to go." In the late winter of 1968 we met, Anna and I, and 6 Episcopal priests and their wives. The meeting, 3 days long, was held at a mountain retreat east of Du Bois. I was hostile and arrogant as usual, and more disturbed than I had ever known. My hostility was there to diffuse the pain. My mother was there, of course, couldn't get rid of her. Her ghost was nearly palpable. One late night before I had joined the group, I painted her ghost, and I brought the painting as if to bring her along, in an earthly form, so she could be seen and touched, and therefore dealt with. During the second day I stood before the group and held up the painting. "I am God," I said, mocking the clergy. "I have made my mother in my own image." The clergy stared at the haunting canvas, a ghost-like form glistening through the layers of glazes. Suddenly the group leader said, "Let's get rid of the ghost of your mother. Let's burn her up. Throw her in the fire." There was a fire in the fireplace. I stood there suddenly unable to speak. At last I began to weep. I was ashamed. The leader struck again. "Are you afraid to burn the witch?" A preacher came over and quietly put his arm around me. He said, "You only need to burn the ghost that haunts you." I stood there, the tears flowing, humiliated. Then the others came around me and stood with me, and I threw the painting in the fire, and we watched the flames suck up the paint and the glaze, and I saw the face become the fire, and I was horrified, for once again I had destroyed my mother. Yet strangely I was relieved. But ghosts are not so easily destroyed. At John's suggestion, I went to Bethel, Maine for training in an advanced group. The ghost of my mother followed me there. There one evening the trainer had me speak to the ghost. She put her watch on the floor. "This is your mother," she said. "Talk to your mother." I stared at the watch. Finally I said to it, "Why did you leave us, Mother?" The watch was silent. "Your mother can speak through you," the trainer said. Silence. Then, "I had to go," I heard my mother answer. "Why?" I asked. My mother's whisper from my lips. "I couldn't stand the pain." It wasn't you. It was my pain from my own life. "But I loved you," I said. "How, if you loved me, could you hurt me so?" I began to weep, and the voice whispered back, "It was you who hurt you." When I returned to Riverton, I began working as a trainer with a group on my own. We met at my office one evening a week. I'd been afraid that if I explored down there at the bottom where the ugly stuff was hidden, I would be repulsed. I discovered something different. Down there I found a fragile man, a man who was afraid and who had always been afraid, and I learned something very hard to learn, that it was all right to love oneself. I began to incorporate what I'd learned in the groups into my trial work. I began to better understand the witnesses, the judges, the juries. I was able to hear both what was said and what was not said. People reported that a new sort of aura surrounded me, a power they did not fully understand, which followed me into the courtroom. Once a lawyer thought I must be hypnotizing the juries to win those hopeless cases, and he moved the court to order me to stop hypnotizing the juries, which the court found as ludicrous as I learned that great power grew out of listening and hearing. And I realized that if I could feel my own fear, feel my own sense of weakness and powerlessness, I could recognize it in others. If I could speak of my feeling in a straight way, others could hear me, the judge, the jurors. It was as if people in the courtroom suddenly became members of a brotherhood. To admit to being a person and to admit that others are persons as well, that becomes a power in a courtroom. Often John Johnson and I painted together, drank together, staggered and laughed and raged together. Sometimes we skied together. One January day in 1968, during a scorching white blizzard, we skied down Rendezvous Peak in the Tetons, a sheer rock slope covered with deep, blowing, high-altitude snow. I fought the mountain all the way, lost all the way, fell and rolled, got up, headed down again, fell again until nearly exhausted. I finally made it all the way down. We took off our boards and limped into the Alpenhof for lunch. Then I saw her. I have spoken of the event many times, the Rubicon of my life. The woman had raven hair and wild blue cat eyes that caused every other woman to turn from her and made every man stare. I spoke out to the entire restaurant, yet she knew I was speaking to her. "Well, how do you get down from that Rendezvous Peak? It scares the hell out of me." It was as if the two of us were the only two in the room, and she answered politely, amused. "You put a hot little skier in front of you who says, 'Come on, baby.'" She was beckoning with her finger. "And you follow her down." That's what she said. Said it right back, smart-like. Seeing the woman was proof of something. Call it preordination, if you wish. Call it the hand of Providence. To behold that woman that day at that place, it was like creation. It was the creation of a new life for me. I did not speak to her again that day. Then, months later, I was in Casper to try a case in the district court, and I'd gone to the Ramada for lunch, and she was there, sitting with a girlfriend. I didn't have the slightest idea what I was going to say to her. I was on the verge of a stammer. Then I sat down next to her. I pushed her over with my hips to make room, kind of snuggled in the booth next to her, and then I said, "Give me a bite of your steak." She seemed amused. "Oh, I remember you. You're the one who couldn't get down off of Rendezvous Peak. I see you made it." She cut a piece of steak and fed me like a child. Her girlfriend was angry. "Who is this jerk anyway? Who invited you to the party?" I ignored the other woman, my eyes locked on this woman. For Christ's sake, the closer you got to her, the more beautiful she was. She was still amused. Later, when they got up to leave, I caught her and stopped her at the door. "How about your phone number? Friends give each other phone numbers, don't they?" "I haven't any time for that," she said. "I've been through all that before. I watched her drive off in a new Thunderbird. But I knew people in the bar who knew her, and I called her that evening." "No, you can't come up here. What's the matter with you?" "Why, is your husband home?" I asked. "I don't want to see you." "I have to see you. How do I get to your place?" She hung up. From the map in the front of a phone book, I tried to locate where she lived. Then I ran to my car and began to drive, but I couldn't find the street. I found a pay phone. I called again. "I'm lost," I said. I told her the name of the street I was on. "Where's your place from here?" "You must be crazy," she said. "Go away." She hung up. But there was something in the voice, not disgust, not alarm. I started driving up and down the streets, and suddenly I recognized her Thunderbird in front of a house. I walked up to the door and I rang the bell. After a while, the door opened a crack, the chain securely in place. "Hi," I said, a big smile on my face. "How did you get here?" she asked. "Let me in," I said. "Get out of here," she said. She shut the door. I knocked on the door again. Once more she opened it a crack. "Shh, you'll wake up my kids. If you don't let me in, I'm going to serenade you out here in the street, and I'll wake up the whole neighborhood." I pulled up my most powerful baritone and began singing like Ezio Pinza. "With a song in my heart, I behold your adorable face." "All right," she said, "you win." She was laughing, but But you have to promise, just for a moment." "Of course, I promise," I said. We did not understand what happened. I was 39 years old, allegedly sane, on the edge of sanity at least, and this insane thing. We were both frightened, but we would be safe enough if we never fell in love. Love was the danger. We met in secret places, small hotels and motels, and one night we were together and I dreamed her name and woke up laughing. She was startled. "What is it?" she asked. "I just dreamed a poem, and I recited it while it was still fresh in my mind. An untoothed crow came imaging around and mocked right up to Mockery Town. Said he, 'Some think I'm just a clown, but to me I'm a drowned dog, and that's what I've maintained all along.'" I sat up in bed and laughed some more. "Your name is Imogene Crow," I said, and that has been her name ever since. And one day she named me Adam, the first man, the first for her. It was insane, and we knew it. I was a husband, a father of 4, in love with the mother of another man's children. She had 2 small, handsome boys, Brent's about 8 and Christopher not yet 3. She had already divorced their father once, but in a desperate concern to keep the family together, she had remarried her husband. She was 28, I was 10 years older. I remained busy in my office. By this time I was making good money, steady money for my insurance company clients. And although I won, I grew unhappy in my work. I felt empty. I drank more whiskey, thought it helped, drank it even though I knew it didn't. I found myself arranging my days around the time when I could have a drink. Just as well arrange your days around the bottle as anything else, I thought.